20th, 1974. Just again, if we haven't gotten that, November 20th, 1974. I'm in Oak Park, Michigan, with Rabbi Benjamin Gorrelick. Now, the first thing I wanted to do was to find out, when did you first come to Europe, and when was your first encounter with survivors of the Holocaust period?
I was, you want me to talk to you?
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's very good.
I was sent overseas at the end of March 1945, together with 14 other Jewish chaplains, in a group of 150 chaplains of all denominations. We went under Queen Mary, and we observed the Sidorim there. The Queen Mary was packed with soldiers, and there were Jewish soldiers too. I arrived first in Southampton, England, where we stayed for about a week, Cholamed, Pesach, till after Passover. Then we were sent to a replacement depot in Verviers, France, where we spent 3 weeks without doing a thing. And we were not in any close contact with Jews. There were only 2 Jewish families that we discovered there. And finally, I was assigned to Normandy base section, which was as an administrative Jewish chaplain in the office. This base section has its headquarters in Deauville, France. Oh. My tasks were to visit cemeteries and also to visit Jewish army personnel in Le Havre, France, those coming in on boats from the States and those stationed there also in replacement depots. In Le Havre, I first came in contact with some Jews who had since France was at that time already free from the occupation, had come out and settled there with the help of Jewish soldiers and chaplains. In Deauville, I was stationed, I succeeded Rabbi Aaron Dechter, and I stayed there only until the middle of June 1945. Following that, the Normandy base section and the Channel base section were combined into Channel base section with headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. In Brussels, I served from the middle of June till about the in 1945 till about the first week in January 1946. At that time, it was already after VE Day, and therefore there was no problem about fear of German soldiers. So I immediately made contact with the Jewish community, and within a day or two, I discovered that there were 10 Jewish orphanages in and around Brussels, all of them containing children from the age of 5 to 20 who had somehow hidden and survived the Holocaust. And the Jews in Brussels and in Belgium who had come out from hiding had organized in some fashion these orphanages. My assignment was to be a base chaplain responsible for chaplain supplies in the entire base. This included about 200 to 250 chaplains scattered all over France, Belgium, and part of Holland. And because I was a Jewish chaplain, I was trusted with the supplies. Because otherwise the Catholics and the Protestants were very jealous of each other. Because of this, I was also given a warehouse. I immediately made contact with the main office of the Jewish orphanages.
Do you remember when that was?
This was about the third week in June 1945. There I was welcomed by a non-Jewish lady who supervised the activities. Her name was Jean Damon. And she was a nursery teacher. And when she saw how the Nazis were pulling out Jewish children from nursery schools, she gave all her life and interest towards saving as many children as possible and placing them in various non-Jewish homes in order to hide them from the Nazi grabbers. This young lady said to me, "We're very happy to see you, Rabbi Gorrelick. We have 10 orphanages. We are certainly interested in your spiritual guidance and moral uplifting."
May I say something? Go ahead.
Yes. But we not only need your spiritual guidance, but your physical health. As you see, we have just recently become freed from Nazi occupation, and we lack many, many things. I immediately made visits to as many of these orphanages as I could. And I spent every evening in some different orphanage, and I saw how in need they were of clothes and even of food. I immediately wrote to my wife in Albany, New York, where my pulpit was at that time, that she must organize the women, Jewish women in Albany, and have a project of packages, because the JDC has not yet established offices in Brussels. And the JDC was not yet able, at that time.
You don't have to talk so loud if you don't want to.
Not to talk so much.
No, you don't have to.
No, when you have to
It
take
picks
it-
it up, it picks it
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
And the
No, it's
JDC
easy
was
for
not
you.
yet able to supply them with
recovering.
urgently necessary supplies. Within 3 weeks, sometimes in July, my wife had organized the community in Albany, and they spent 2 nights every week packaging good food and clothing, and she shipped them to me. And towards the end of July, I was getting an avalanche of such packages, which I immediately turned over to Jean Damon, who gave it to any of the orphanages that needed these supplies very much. The supplies included clothing for children of all sizes and all sorts, and a good deal of food, soap, sugar, and all those things that they needed. This was a godsend. In addition to receiving these packages from Albany, New York, through the help of my wife, the Jewish soldiers used to meet at a British-sponsored Jewish Soldiers Center in Brussels. And there I used to see hundreds of Jewish soldiers every day. Some on leave, and some were just spending the evening amongst with other Jewish soldiers. I placed 2 big barrels there, and I told the Jewish soldiers that I need all kinds of food and clothing that they can possibly discard and give away or secure from others. And so these barrels used to be filled every day, and I used to take them to the main office of the orphanages, of the orphan homes, where they used them. Most of these were clothes in khaki color, army uniforms. And there used to be a problem because these civilian boys loved American Army uniforms, and they were very often caught, and they were suspected of stealing. So I pleaded with the kids, I'm going to dye them in a different color. And they refused, because to them to be identified with the Army, in the American Army, was a great joy and a source of great pride to them. So on many occasions I had to rescue these kids from the MPs who caught them and were trying to take them to the brig. At any rate, some of these packages were not neatly and tightly packed.
Professional packers back here.
And tightly packed. So after a number of months, as they came to the post office, the Army post office, beans would slip out of the package, sugar and flour would slip out, and those in charge, the non-Jewish, suspected me of dealing with the black market because how could I get so many packages?
That's what I wanted to ask you.
Yeah. So I was actually called in by the directing general of the area.
Do you remember his
A
name?
general by the name of Koenig, Koenig.
And what was his first name?
I don't remember his first name right now.
Excuse me,
Koenig,
I don't- But you know, after, if I may say something, after a while, because it got to be so suspicious, he gave me names of people.
Honey, will you let me?
Instead of sending it all
I'm
to
coming
him, do you
to it.
understand?
I see.
Gave me
And-
soldiers and,
Koenig said you are suspicious and I may bring you up on court-martial charges for black market dealings. I said, sir, I'll take you to the orphanages to whom I give this food, and this is being sent to me by my wife and my community in Albany, New York. I said, you may bring me up on court-martial charges, but I want to assure you that the Jewish community in America is going to find out about this immediately. He says, okay, we're not going to bother, but remember, you're serving the army, you're not serving the Jewish people and the Jewish community in Brussels.
excuse me,
Wait,
stop it, I just wanted to say.
No, this is all right. Go ahead.
Yeah.
This is Mrs.
Tell-
Gorrelick.
No, it's not important. But you know, I think this is he used to tell me, he used to say, what would he do with his off evenings? Every night he went to the orphanages. On the other hand, where did the non-Jewish chaplains go? To shikar, to drink. I mean, not casting aspersions, but this was his
No.
after all, he was in the army, he wasn't, so he was suspicious at all times, but he went to the orphan home every evening. This is where he would spend his time to see what he could do for these remnants. This is what he would write me in the letters. Okay, you're in business.
All right.
Do you remember the name of the congregation in Albany? That
Yes.
just be-
Sure.
The name of my congregation in Albany was Sons of Israel. At any rate,
Was this, excuse me, one second. Did this package operation, was that only by your synagogue or was it generally
Only
by?
by ours.
Uh-huh.
well,
The women
some
helped
of-
me.
some
I
of-
don't
No, but I'm
know.
saying, but your congregation, there wasn't a community
No, it was
involvement.
No, it was our congregation, so that the women helped. There were men who, the parcels
but
got
that's
so
not-
big after a while, out of proportion, that I had a driver, volunteers from our organization, from our synagogue, who would, one day they'd take the stuff to the post office, Mr. Levenberg. These are little things, but in retrospect, it may seem small, but it was a mitzvah, believe me, when
Right.
someone volunteered to go weekly and bring these things. But I don't know about I don't recall of the community at large, whether it's...
There were some people there.
Yes, but
Oh.
people came, not from just volunteered to help, you see. But it was essentially Sons of Israel Synagogue, from our synagogue. Wasn't it, Ben?
Yes. This operation, package operation to Belgium, was sponsored and prepared exclusively by members of the Sons of Israel, the congregation which I left in order to join the chaplaincy. When I had
Wrote
this,
to me and I organized. That's the way it
when I was called to task by the General Koenig, this was about October 1945, I immediately wrote to my wife to please stop sending the packages to me. And in its place, I sent her dozens of Jewish soldiers' names to whom these packages should be addressed.
Now, wasn't there a danger that some of these soldiers would be sent home in the interim?
I took chances. I took chances.
I mean, how could they oppose, or helping to sustain lives?
Right.
He was taking a chance. Look, what was there to lose?
And so these packages came less and less to me and more to these Jewish soldiers whom I trusted, who upon receiving them immediately turned them over to me, and I directed them to the orphanages. In all, these packages amounted to about 3,000 altogether, and they were of great help, especially in the early months of my residence in Brussels, because at that time very little direct aid could reach Brussels from the JDC, even though later money came these packages became superfluous because the JDC provided sufficient.
At what point in time did they become superfluous?
They became superfluous around October or November 1945. But even then, the kind of packages I received were American-made, either foodstuffs or clothes, mostly clothing, and those things were not obtainable in Brussels at the time, even for money.
And also you provided them with clothes for children.
Right.
Which the army did not have.
Right. I could obtain used clothes from the soldiers directly. Those were stationed in and around. But they were for the older children, and certainly very little.
They converted bigger clothes to small. You were able to sew it. There were always someone that could make these clothes fit for children, you see.
An interesting incident. One evening, I spent together with two non-Jewish chaplains, and one of them said to me, "You're getting a lot of clothes. I know a family, and I could use some of it for that a non-Jewish family." Of course, I gave it to him, but I said to him, "Couldn't you do the same thing that I did? Namely, write to your church and ask them to send these things to you?" He was a bit embarrassed, but then he says, "You Jews can do a lot of things that we can't." Another incident.
A wholesale bar mitzvah.
Yes, another incident. We lived in a house that there were 4 chaplains, 1 Catholic, 2 Protestant, and myself. One night a week, for purposes of sociability, I used to spend with the chaplains in order they shouldn't accuse me of being too high hat with them. They used to go practically every night to the officers' club. So the Catholic chaplain made it a principle to try and get me drunk because he used to drink every night. For social purposes, I used to also take a drink with them. But my luck was that after the second drink, he couldn't tell the difference for what was happening. So following the rest of the night, I used to drink Coca-Cola. And he thought I was drinking whiskey. Came next morning, his eyes were as glass. He used to drink a quart a night. And in fact, my allotment of liquor as an officer I was entitled to, I used to give it to him. He says, "Ben, you drank as much as I did last night. How come that you're so fresh and alert and able to do things?" He says, I used to say, "Harry, he was a Jesuit, a very learned fellow, but he had this weakness, unfortunately. Harry, you never studied Talmud. Talmud is a sort of a protection against getting drunk. When you go back home, remember to begin to study Talmud." Another incident that was also perhaps humorous, but also sad. I spent an evening with the non-Jewish chaplains, and we had a discussion. If we were able to get all the army surplus, take it to the States and sell it, we'd become rich people. And of course, says my colleague, the Catholic chaplain would give it to an orphanage in the States as money. The Protestant would help his church. But you, Ben, would probably become a rich rabbi and stop being a rabbi with this thing. Then I looked at him and I looked at him. He says, "I'd be a rich rabbi. Would you come some evening with me and see what I'm doing with my spare time, with my great efforts in behalf?" He felt embarrassed. He said it's just a joke. At any rate, in addition to providing these packages, or being an instrument for the securing of these packages from the States, my community in Albany, New York, I obviously became very close to as much of the Jewish community that was back in function. The chief rabbi of Belgium was a Rabbi Ullman, who was also a Jewish chaplain in the Belgian army.
What was his first name?
I don't know. I have it here. With the help of the JWB and the chaplaincy department, I was able to secure many dozens of talesim and about 3 or 4 dozen pair of tefillin. And there were many boys who had not been bar mitzvah. Their ages range between that of 14 and 19. And they were very anxious, especially after liberation, to have that ceremony take place for them. With my help, we organized 2 wholesale bar mitzvahs in the main synagogue in Brussels.
This is in conjunction with the rabbi of Brussels? Belgium?
Yes. There was another Rabbi, Berman, who unfortunately committed suicide. He was a very unhappy man afterwards. And those were 2 outstanding public events.
Do you remember when they took place?
Yes. One of them,
You have it in the book.
I'll
dear.
tell you, can you
Cut
stop
it
it?
off, Alan.
There were 2 wholesale bar mitzvahs arranged with my help in the main synagogue in Brussels. One took place sometimes in September 1945 and the other in October 1945.
Is there any way of tracing exactly when the dates exactly when it took place?
I'll tell you. I'll give you those letters. You
Okay.
can find them.
Okay.
Yeah, but send those back.
If you want, you can. I'll pay for Xeroxing here, and then you can send them back, or just whichever is
He
easier
doesn't
for
want to
you.
lose them.
No, what I'm saying is,
There were about 15 boys in the September bar mitzvah and about 20 in the October bar mitzvah. The gentleman who was instrumental in preparing these boys for the ceremony was Cantor Pinchas Kallenberg, who somehow survived the Holocaust, and he and I worked together.
What a doll. I met him.
At present, he is the Jewish chaplain of the Belgian army. Pierre Kallenberg is his name. If you ever go to Brussels, you look him up.
Yeah.
In fact, he and I still correspond every Rosh Hashanah.
You still send them the Hadoah.
In addition to being a good chazan,
He's an artist.
he's an artist. He had exhibits with the Queen Mother, opening them, and so on. Obviously, the boys and some of their families who attended were very much touched, and this was perhaps one of my greatest rewards in the chaplaincy service. Let me see, what else can I tell you?
well, what was your part in because we want to be very specific.
Yeah.
What was your part in setting up this?
Right. My part, chiefly, was to provide each boy with a tallis and a pair of tefillin, to begin with, and also to address them, with the permission of the rabbi, at these bar mitzvah services.
Now, could this have come about without your help?
I don't think so, because it was I who was told that there are many boys who were not bar mitzvah. I who had direct contact with these boys because I attended services as often as possible in the main synagogue, who had these requests made of me directly from the boys. And once I requested these religious articles from the JWB, it became a matter of preparation. As soon as they arrived, they set a date for them, and they presented each one of them. As a matter of fact, they honored me with making the presentation of a tallis and a pair of tefillin to each boy right at the affair. In addition, they had a somewhat modest repast following the services, and it was I who provided the food for these. And some women associated with the synagogue did the preparation. Yes. I worked very closely. Rabbi Ullman was a rather older man, and his title of chaplain, chief rabbi of Brussels and chaplain of the Belgian army, was more symbolic than actual. The functioning rabbi in that main synagogue was a Rabbi Berman, who was a graduate of the rabbinical school in France. But he was a very unhappy man. At any rate, most of the Jews who came to synagogue wanted, because both of my uniform and my American background, to secure help for me. I was instrumental in getting names of families of these survivors from the States directly. Either if they had the address, I'd write directly to these people, and if not, I sent these addresses and names of relatives to the Jewish forwards who published it, and they published also my address. And through this means, I was instrumental in bringing together many dozens of Jewish families, relatives of these survivors who had used to come to me very often to seek for it. The army became the American army. Yes, the
I have to tell, the Rebbetzin sent me many little pieces of lace. This Rabbi Olman's wife, whom we met in Israel 3 years ago, she found out that we were there. Of course, this is not important as far as, but it's very interesting.
During the high holidays, I arranged for an army service in the Palais des Beaux-Arts in Brussels. This was the most beautiful concert hall in the city of Brussels. And I particularly remember organizing the break fast after Yom Kippur. But I wanted to have a kosher meal. Kosher in the sense that an entree for at least. So the army, the American army, provided me with new utensils in the kitchen. They set up a mobile kitchen for that purpose, and they sent mess personnel with eggs and other things that they could prepare that very night following the fast on Yom Kippur. And we must have had about 300 soldiers, all of whom were served in new utensils, and each one was served scrambled eggs or some form of prepared eggs. And so they not only had a feeling of breaking bread together after the fast with their fellow Jewish soldiers, but they also had the feeling that this was more or less a truly Jewish meal. On that occasion, I had many Jewish survivors, whom the soldiers befriended, and in whose behalf they made pledges during the Yom Kippur service and all paid them after the fast. It amounted to about 10,000 francs. It was donated to the community chest for welfare. The army personnel became less and less, and it was so organized that the Brussels area was under the command of the British, and not the American. The American were more or less under the direction of the British. So as the army personnel became less and less, there was no more, they gave up the Chanor base section with which I was connected. And therefore, about the first week of January, I was given orders.
1946.
In 1946, I was given orders to leave. I left for Paris, from which I was assigned but it took at least 5 or 6 weeks. I was assigned to Frankfurt. In Frankfurt, I met with a Rabbi Newhouse who had survived. Apparently he had been in the, and he had already come back, he had been in the, what was that concentration camp in Czechoslovakia?
Treblinka?
No. He had survived in Theresienstadt. And his first contact with me brought out a great deal of bitterness. Where were you, American Jews? Obviously, I listened. I wouldn't talk back to him because he had the sad experience. About 4 years later, when I moved from Albany to Detroit, he had been in Detroit, the rabbi of a German Jewish congregation. And then he apologized to me. He says, after what you have done, why should I have reprimanded you? I thought you might continue. I did not get to Frankfurt until March 1946.
Excuse me, Ben, when did you go to Irving's grave? Unfortunately, sadly, the rabbi's brother was killed in the Battle of the Bulge at this time.
Well, while I was in Belgium. In Frankfurt, I was assigned as a roving chaplain to fill in wherever services were needed. And in April, I was given release papers. So I actually didn't do very much in Germany. Mm-hmm. But while I was in Brussels, I think I contributed immensely towards the welfare of close to 3,000 Jewish orphans, most of whom had lost both parents, and many of whom were saved by Christian families who had kept them in hiding during the period of occupation.
Fine. Now, can we be a little more specific in terms of the orphanage? In terms of your work there, did you provide food for them from the army? Did you ever have to take food from any place in order to feed them?
Yes.
Are there any stories connected with that?
No. I did provide food, but the food was mostly that which was sent to me from Albany, New York.
Mm-hmm. In other words,
and they were in large quantities, tremendously large. Mm-hmm. There were flour, beans, sugar.
So you didn't have
candies, I imagine, candies.
So you didn't have to go to the army for anything at all?
Yes, the army only. I made acquaintance with a number of Jewish mess sergeants, and I told them in a quiet way to give me whatever surplus they could probably lay their hands on. So they used to bring me tremendous cans of canned fruit and juice, and also dehydrated eggs, which was very helpful. But most of the things were clothes, and these clothes came directly from individual soldiers who had surplus. They had 2 pairs of shoes, so they knew that they could get another pair whenever they needed it. Mm-hmm. They had more than 2 sets of trousers.
Were there any GIs working with you at the orphanages?
Yes, there were a number. Now, somehow, I had 2 chaplain's assistants, both of whom were very deeply trained Jewishly. One was an ex-student of Yeshiva University, and the other one was a graduate of Chaim Berlin Yeshiva. The name of one was Joel Phillips. The other one was Haskell Hollander. Towards the end of my stay, the Army urged the chaplains to arrange for a 2-week school for anyone of their denomination who is interested in joining the ministry as a means of providing some interested activity for them upon discharge. In the school that I organized, there was Chaplain Milton Goldman, an Orthodox, Chaplain, is it Harry Saperstein? You know his first name? Harold Saperstein, a Reform, and myself, an Orthodox, a Conservative, together with Rabbi Ullman. We attracted these 2 chaplain's assistants, plus another Jewish soldier by the name of Reinhardt, who had not exactly been associated with a chaplain, but he was interested to join the rabbinate. As a matter of fact, I came that I knew his family, and I was once a teacher of an uncle of his, a Hebrew teacher of an uncle of his. This young man by the name of Reinhardt even joined or enrolled in the seminary about 3 years afterwards, but I don't think he graduated from the seminary. At any rate, these 3 young men, together with the 3 chaplain and the rabbi of Brussels, spent 2 weeks together. 2 weeks together. We more or less oriented them to the work of the rabbinate, and we also had some very interesting lessons in Midrash, in Chumash and Rashi, and it were 2 weeks of very interesting Jewish companionship.
Now, this Joel Phillips, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Joel Phillips was my chaplain's assistant from the very moment I came to overseas, and he served with me through my stay in Brussels, which was January 1946. Joel Phillips was from Brooklyn, and Haskell Hollander was from Rochester, New York. His father had been the head of a Jewish orphanage in that city. Very interesting young man, a very fine person. Joel Phillips, he is at present an assistant principal of a high school in Brooklyn, and he is also a principal of a Hebrew school in Long Island.
Do you know the synagogue?
I think it's Wantagh, Long Island. Wantagh. As a matter of fact, Joel Phillips served as my cantor in Albany for 3 consecutive high holiday periods. Haskell Hollander studied Jewish social work, and for many years he was a Jewish social worker in Pittsburgh. Now he works for the government in Pittsburgh. What happened to Reinhardt, I don't know.
Fine. Were there any other stories about the orphanage that you might...
Yes. I visited 1 or 2, I used to visit 1 or 2 orphanages every day, one during the day and one at night. As a chaplain, I had a jeep at my disposal. And as a matter of fact, I deliberately took off the 2 tablets that distinguished my jeep from any other in order not to be too conspicuous. But because I had a jeep, and I also had a warehouse in my capacity as supply chaplain, or chaplain, I was able to store some of these things and deliver them at my convenience to these.
You were afraid of the army, is that it? Concerned?
I was concerned lest I be charged once again with black market activities.
Because you didn't have a supportive general.
Right. I had to do it very cautiously.
Obviously, they didn't keep a close watch on you.
No. I had a warehouse where, in one part of it, I had all kinds of chaplain supplies, including candles, rosaries, crosses, which I had to supply to all non-Jewish chaplains. That was my responsibility. As a matter of fact, because I was the chaplain in charge of supplies, I was turned to by many of the chaplains stationed in various parts of the area who wanted to spend a day or 2 in Brussels, that I provide them with the passes, which I did, and I also had to provide them with lodging and so on. And because of my friendliness with these chaplains, they more or less, when they found out about it, were were full of admiration for the kind of work I was doing. But they also supplied me with names of Jewish families in the outlying areas. And on my visits, 2 chaplains I was able to stop, have tea with them, and leave with each one of them some clothes that I used to keep in my jeep. Let's see, what else is I going to take? Yes, where is that little thing ahead? Okay. This is one of my mementos of the chaplaincies, of the orphanages. This is one of the homes in which they stayed.
Do you remember the names of these?
Here.
Yeah, but where is that?
Auderghem is one. Oh, I see it.
That's the chaplain.
Yeah.
This is Haskell Holland
Uh-huh.
talking to the kids there. Look at the soldiers. Oh, un jeep arrive.
Uh-huh.
Jeep arrives. Shalom, Monsieur le Chapelain. Shalom, Chaver de la Brigade. This is a Jewish brigade soldier.
Uh-huh.
They were stationed also in Belgium
Right.
at the time. Ah, vous.
Okay, this is a story about
Yes.
Gorrelick.
You heard about Max Browdy?
Sure,
Okay, you know Max
I
Browdy.
met him, yes.
One day, Max Browdy,
Do you remember when?
approximately in October 1945, came running into my office. He says, Ben Gorrelick, I can't talk to you, but I'm being followed by the CID. I want two things. One, a back door through which I can escape and without being noticed. And two, 10,000 francs. Don't ask me how you're going to get it. Well, at that particular moment, I didn't have 10,000 francs with me. So I tried to borrow from all the other chaplains that were there, and there were 4 chaplains in my office, in and around our office. I was able to round up 5,000 francs. And
How much is that worth?
at that
that
time,
time?
5,000 francs, I would say Belgian francs are worth about $1,000. And very quietly and secretly, I got hold of a soldier with a jeep and asked the soldier to take him through back alleys. And of course, I know he wasn't arrested at that particular time. And anyone who knows Max Browdy during that period knows that he had a great deal of wherewithal to dodge army surveillance. This is another incident that I remember. There was no DP camps in Belgium, and my territory included Belgium, south of France, and a tip of Holland, where I used to have to go to make sure that there were markers upon graves of Jewish soldiers, or respond to interested parents as to whether the grave of their loved ones are actually located in the places they were advised they were. What was I going to tell you? But
It's hard to recall.
in my experience, I had an opportunity to meet with Jewish civilians, many of them, most of them, survivors. I used to meet them at Jewish services in various parts of Belgium. And many of them, I was able to connect with families in the United States. And a few of them I even followed up their careers in this country. Especially one who had lived here in Detroit and became a photographer, and whom I used to help very much secure clients for his work.
Excuse me, didn't you have any survivors that came here or something,
Let's
or
see,
you
let's see.
married,
All
or
right, let me see. Now,
I
let me
seem to recall?
All right, look at this. This is given to me by this cantor, Kallenberg. You know French?
Yeah.
Comité de Bar Mitzvah de la Communauté Israélite. It means Committee of Bar Mitzvah of the Jewish.
Right.
The Bruxelles, they gave me a testimonial of appreciation à Monsieur le Rabban Gorrelick, Rabban de la Communauté de Albany, Chief Chaplain de l'armée américaine en
There, you know, he likes
Belgique.
to teach.
Yes. Matériel à célébration de l'occasion des bar mitzvah guerre, the war bar mitzvahs.
This is amazing.
Are you going to see this Elkins in Rochester or not?
No.
Was he a chaplain too?
He was a chaplain, but later on.
Here are all the kids who were
He's a
born.
younger man.
Here are all the kids who were born. So this was Berman.
Mm-hmm.
He was the functioning rabbi. You see, Ullman was Orthodox. He was more or less modern. This is Kallenberg.
Mm-hmm.
How would you characterize the role of the chaplains during this period?
Do you smoke?
Yes.
Good.
The role of the Jewish chaplains during this period. While the major motivation upon entering the chaplaincy was to serve Jewish soldiers, they felt, here we Jews are in this war and in the army. There is no more. It's only right that we, their rabbi, should be with them. But once they reached overseas, not only they, the chaplain, but also the Jewish soldier, became identified with the survivors and with the opportunity to help as many as possible to regain their equilibrium physically and morally and emotionally. And those of us who are fortunate to be close to these survivors considered their work in the chaplaincy as the greatest achievement in their life. It's it's a case of anyone who saves a single life in Israel is as if he has saved the whole world.
Now, what do you think would have happened if the chaplains weren't there?
Well, it's
Particularly in your case.
yes. Well, I am sure that my contribution to the Jewish orphans and the orphanages in Brussels was modest. But I certainly was there at a point of time for my services, and with the help of my wife and my community, have certainly contributed immensely towards their immediate and basic physical needs. Also, my presence as a chaplain in my uniform to these kids gave them the feeling that they are not alone, they're not just saved, but they're part of a Jewish community that stretches out to the United States, which to them was a very magic word, the Jews of America at that particular time.
Were many of these children resentful of American Jewish activity during the war? In other words,
They were too young to think that they were neglected.
mm-hmm.
I don't think they were resentful. On the contrary, they welcomed me. I didn't find any expression of resentment or anger or unhappiness.
They'd hang on to him, you see, like to a father.
Every time I left a home, there was such sadness because they didn't want to part with me.
Mm-hmm.
This feeling was not only experienced or shown, demonstrated by the kids themselves, but also by those who took care of it.
Did you have any activities with other chaplains? Jewish chaplains? Aside from this one incident
Yeah.
with Rowdy.
We went over together with Jack Siegel, but I think they separated.
No,
Jack
I'm
went to
talking about.
Paris.
I'm talking in terms of actual work.
Or working together.
Working together. Yeah.
Yes. Well, my situation was unique in the sense that I was part of a base section, and therefore I was centrally located. While there have been about a dozen Jewish chaplains within my area, but they were scattered, and the only thing they used to come, they too had local Jewish people whom they helped in some fashion. And they weren't stationed there long enough, especially those who were part of a unit had to move along with the unit. I think that some chaplains have done more than me, those who were directly involved in the concentration camps. But my position was unique in that I was able, through my administrative position, to be an instrument to help these people.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes, speaking.
Did you?
Oh, Israel.
10,000 francs.
Right.